Thank you, Glenn. Hi, guys. Francine, alcoholic. And actually, I will be at the Women's Conference again this year in Dallas. I will be there on Friday night. So I cannot believe it's here already. My name is Francine, and I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank Glenn for this. Let me make sure I can see everyone. Yeah. I want to thank Lynn for this really sweet invitation yet again to be of service. I want to first welcome you if you're new. You know, when we ask if there's a newcomer in the room, it's my belief that most of the time newcomers don't get their hands up, for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's that they're coming back yet again and they feel ashamed. Maybe it's that they're here for the first time and they see all of these faces and they're a little intimidated. Maybe they're even still drinking. Who knows? All I can say is if you're with us today, I am so, so very grateful that you are. And I hope that in coming to one of these meetings, you find something that makes you want to keep coming back. By the way, I'm timing myself. I suspect I have my timer on. Often in AA, we say, keep coming back. That's not what I say. I'm going to say, if you are a newcomer, I'm going to say, come and stay. Take up a seat and stay, because the truth is, the magic really only happens when you stay, not when you come in and out. And the other thing is you might not make it back. So if you're here, I say welcome, glad you're here. Stay with us. Stay with us. I'd like to start out by reading something from conference-approved literature. It's one of my most favorite books in Alcoholics Anonymous, and there are many that I love. But this one is As Bill Sees It, and this is page 37 if you have the book, A Full and Thankful Heart. One exercise that I practice is to try for a full inventory of my blessings, and then for a right acceptance of the many gifts that are mine, both temporal and spiritual. Here I try to achieve a state of joyful gratitude. When such a brand of gratitude is repeatedly affirmed and pondered, it can finally displace the natural tendency to congratulate myself on whatever progress I may have been enabled to make in some areas of my life. I try hard to hold fast to the truth that a full and thankful heart cannot entertain great conceits. When brimming with gratitude, one's heartbeat must surely result in outgoing love, the finest emotion that we can ever know. I have started to start talks of late with that because honestly, I sit before you and it's morning for me. It's afternoon for some of you, and I guess depending upon where you're calling from, it could be evening. But I sit here just, my cup runneth over. And it blows me away when I think of that. I think of myself, I look at myself and I think, how in the world? My sobriety date is July 26, 1979. I haven't had a drink or a drug in my body in over 43 years. And I had a birthday last Monday, a week ago Monday, I turned 70 years old. And honestly, I don't know which of those numbers makes me want to fall out of this chair. The fact that I'm 43 years old, or now I'm a centenarian. It's like even saying that. And yet I am so excited. If there is anybody around, probably not in this meeting, but when I turned 60, I sat in meetings everywhere I was and had a meltdown. I mean, I couldn't, people used to bring their violins out when they saw me coming and heard me starting to talk. Poor Francine, she's 60 years old. And, as a result of that, I go to women's meetings primarily. And the women in the meetings where I were, most of them were older than me, and they would say, get over it. And so I had a big party and I got over it. And as a result, I loved my 60s. And so I am so excited that I am now in this 7th decade of my life. And you know why I'm excited? Because of Alcoholics Anonymous, because of what you've given me, what you've enabled me to give to myself, the life that I get to have, because of you. I had I guess about a year ago, I found as I was cleaning out some files, I came across this document and it's kind of tattered and torn. I said I wanted to have it laminated, but if I do, I wouldn't be able to fold it. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I'm now saving it. And, obviously God didn't think I should have seen this before. Who knows? Maybe I would have had another meltdown. But when I found it, now I'm not letting it go because, oh my God, it is such a reminder of where I've come from. So this document is dated and it's pretty old. It's dated June 25th, 1972. So I was young. I was only 19 years old when I got this document. And it was issued to me by the criminal court of the city of New York. I used to love being there. They probably didn't love having me there, but I seem to have been there a lot. And on this document, there are lots of charges. Many of them are kind of faded out, but here's some of the ones that I can read. Criminal trespass, possession of burglar tools. I mean, 19 years old. It's like, God. Criminal mischief, petty larceny, criminal tampering, solicitation, which is a really nice way of saying prostitution. I mean, these are just a few of the charges in this document. And I was only 19 years old. And it wasn't even my first arrest by this time. I never want to get rid of that document because it is so easy for someone like me today to forget where I've come from. I don't look the same. I don't dress the same. I don't smell the same. The language I use is different. The way I carry myself as a woman is different. My profession is different, although there are more than a handful of people who think there's this really super thin line between a hooker and a lawyer, but I know there's a difference. I understand, but for me, it is so important to hold on to that because, again, but for the grace of God, I could be back there. I could be back there. But, God's given me such a gift, such a gift. And today I don't want to re-gift that gift. I don't want to give it back. I'm a drug addicted alcoholic prostitute off the streets of New York. And I never, ever, ever want to forget that. So what I'd like to share with you in the time that I have, I'd like to share with you some of the things that have enabled me to go from that horrid existence that I lived on the street, homeless, selling my body to support a drug habit, to support any kind of habit, to where I get to sit today, a woman who is, well, I look at myself in the mirror and I like who I am today. And most of the time, I love who I am. Yeah, there are occasions when it's a little questionable, but for the most part, because of the way I live my life, I appreciate the woman that I am. So here are some of the things that have enabled me to go from there to here. And the things that I'll talk about are things that anybody who's sober for more than a minute, these things. So I'm not going to be telling anybody anything different or anything new. But for me, I put them together in the form of, it's my patched quilt. I made this and it's kind of messy, but it does the job. Because each one of these patches speaks to one of the tools in Alcoholics Anonymous that not only has enabled me not to drink a day at a time, but has enabled me to go from that place where I was to a place that's so totally different today. So my first patch piece is abstinence. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, of course, Francine, abstinence, you're not drinking. Well, you know what I've discovered in AA? That not everybody defines words in the same way. For example, abstinence. I know people who define abstinence as they don't drink, but it's okay to use drugs because it says Alcoholics Anonymous. I know other people who think abstinence means it's okay to not drink a lot of alcohol, but maybe I can have near beer or other non-alcoholic beverages. Well, I have to tell you, for me, for an alcoholic of my type, I don't drink and I don't use no matter what, period. And neither do I let myself get too close to the edge because honestly, I am deathly afraid of going out. And I'm not afraid to tell you either that I'm afraid to go out because I see what happens to people who do get too close to the edge and do go out. Just recently I was at a meeting and there was a woman who had more time than me. She was 44 years sober. She had gone out and she'd been struggling to get back for 2 weeks. She shared 2 weeks. She couldn't put together more than 2 days. That could be me, although I don't even think I'd make it back. And then one of my closest friends when I lived in LA, she called me the other day. She admitted she'd been drinking for several years. It's like and her sobriety was right under mine. I know it could happen to me if I get too far away, too far, too far from what I believe is real recovery. And so again, what does getting too close to the edge look like for me? It means drinking near beer. It means drinking anything that has any alcohol in it. So I remember when I was new, near beer was all the rage, and it still is today. They call it different things, hard seltzer, it's called all kinds of stuff today. And I remember going to my sponsor and I said, Louise, because there was something in my mind that just, I don't know, it didn't feel right. I didn't know that I couldn't drink it, but I knew something, it was questionable. So I went to my sponsor and I said, Louise, is this something okay for me to drink? And she said, if it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, if it tastes like a duck, if it smells like a duck, you might want to assume it's a duck. Okay. She said, also, you're always asking questions. You're always challenging things. Why don't you go do some research? No wonder I'm a lawyer because I do always challenge things. So I went and did some research. And do you know what I discovered? I discovered that if it's called non-alcoholic anything, it has alcohol in it. It might have 0.05%, 0.1%, but that's alcohol. That is alcohol. So I stay clear. I stay clear of anything that reeks of booze. I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. I don't drink and I don't use. That is probably the number one of my patch pieces. The others are not in any order, but that one probably is at the top of the list because I equate that with step number one. I'm not drinking and I'm not using. Another one of my patch pieces is sponsorship. Now, I'm a believer in sponsors. I believe, number one, in being a sponsor for myself, and I believe in having a sponsor. I want to just say this, you don't have to sponsor. Even Bill W. himself says in the 12 and 12 that there are lots of ways that we are of service, lots of ways. So we don't have to sponsor. You don't have to do 12-step work like that. But I happen to enjoy working with women. I sponsor women. But I also believe in having a sponsor. Why? Because this mass between my ears, if given even half a chance, I am off and running. I'm thinking I got this thing. I'm thinking I'm recovered. Now, again, everybody's got their own perspective on that topic, which is fine. For me, I am a recovering alcoholic. I never want to get to a point where I think I have arrived. I don't want to get to a point where I think I'm one and done. And especially because the big book tells me, and everybody gets to pick out the pieces they seem to like. But for me, the big book says what I have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. It also tells me I'm not cured. So I'm not cured. It's that simple. So having a sponsor who is willing to hold me accountable has always been important for me because honestly, I am as slippery as they come. You give me an inch, and my mother used to tell me this when I was growing up. She says, if I give you an inch, you're taking a yard. One of those Southern women. I was born in the South, by the way, born in Atlanta, raised in New York. My mother used to say, if I just give you an inch, so I got to keep you reined in. And it's the same thing with a sponsor. They got to keep me reined in because even today, I might kind of tiptoe to the other side thinking I got this. So for me, a sponsor, again, is critical. And my first sponsor, I hated her so much. I hated this woman with a passion. And my prayer for you, especially if you're new or even if you're not new and you're struggling and, you can't figure out why, My prayer is that you potentially have a sponsor like I did, because thank God for her. You know, as much as I did not like Louise, she was the best thing that ever happened to me. And God knew it. A God I didn't even believe in knew I needed her brand of recovery, which was behavior matters. Louise constantly talked about that. Behavior matters. How you show up as a woman, it matters in AA. You know, how you present yourself, how you dress, how you carry yourself, the words you use. Behavior matters. Well, I, of course, challenge that because I'm listening to all these men, especially, who would say, oh, it's just about alcoholism. You don't have to worry about anything else. Well, thank God I had a sponsor who really loved the literature. And so she always knew where to go to take me to something Bill W. had to say. And Bill said this about behavior. On the very first page of As Bill Sees It, he says, it has often been said of AA that we are interested only in alcoholism. That is not true. These are Bill's words. We have to get over drinking in order to stay alive. But anyone who knows the alcoholic personality by firsthand contact knows that no true alkie ever, he says ever, stops drinking permanently without undergoing a profound personality change. Those are Bill W.'s words. A profound personality change. He doesn't say you have to change a little bit. He doesn't say you have to change if you feel like it. He said, if we're going to be here for the long haul, a profound personality change is what's needed. I had a sponsor who believed that. She didn't like a lot of things about me. You know, I was 26 years old, thinking I'm all that in a bag of chips. I mean, there were a few things I want to share with you that she really called me on, and I hated every one of them. But yet today, as a woman, I am so grateful I had a sponsor who loved me more than I loved myself. So that first thing she called me on was, well, I had this nasty little habit of sleeping with other people's husbands. Now, my thinking is it's not my fault. You know, it is not my fault. Nothing was ever my fault. I said to her, what if I'm walking down the street, a guy is holding on to his honey, and he's giving me the eye? What should I do? Like, poor me, poor innocent me. She said the stupidest thing. She said, you should turn your head. What? Why should I be so inconvenienced because he can't keep his pants zipped up? That didn't make sense to me. But you know what? Making sense or not, there's not any woman, not only no woman in AA, but there's no woman anywhere who would have to worry about me putting the make on her man. And that might not mean much to anybody in this room today, but I will tell you, for me, it's an estimable act. And I had a sponsor who believed that self-esteem comes from doing estimable acts. Doesn't come from thinking, doesn't come from feeling, doesn't come from quoting from the big book when I'm not putting it into practice. It comes from doing estimable acts. One of the other things that behaviors that she had me change, oh gosh, was how I dress. Now, I dress pretty appropriately for the occasion today, you know, wherever I am. But picture this. When I got sober, now I'm pretty small, but I was very, very thin when I got sober. But even, I mean, I don't care how thin you are, 6 inches does not cover much. So I used to wear hot pants when hot pants were not even in style anymore. And I would wear 6-inch, they were about 6 inches worth of fabric in those hot pants. And I would wear see-through blouses, and I'd wear see-through blouses with no bras back in the day. I don't dare go there now, but that's how I used to dress. And I would wear super high heels, which I still wear very high heels, but I used to wear high heels with big taps. Some of the women might remember when, you know, we're kids, you have big taps on your heels. Well, I was still doing it at 26, 27, 28. So I'd go into a meeting late, for starters, until Louise put a stop to that one. I'd come sashaying into a meeting late, and instead of sitting in the back of the room, like I now know, if you're late, you should do, you know, keep your mouth closed, sit in the back, don't be disruptive. Not me. I'd walk in the front of the room in front of the speaker with my little hot pants, my see-through blouse, and my huge taps. I mean, talk about being a vision for you. I was honestly, as a newcomer, I was such a piece of work. I don't even know how I stayed sober, really. But for the grace of God, I would be out there. I couldn't understand how come at the end of the meeting, there was this long line of men waiting to get my phone number. And not one woman wanted to even talk to me. I remember saying to Louise, they are just jealous of me. She said, honey, no, they're not jealous. They are repelled by you because you're so vile. I was like, what? The other behavior that she thought I needed to change, and again, this is my experience, you can ignore all of these things. But for me, these are things that mattered. They've come to matter. I came into AA with a filthy mouth. Every other word out of my mouth was a 4-letter word. And you would have thought I didn't know any other words because I never used any other words. And I remember when I first got sober in 79, answering machines had just come into being. And in AA, you guys used to say, and not my sponsor, but everybody else used to say the newcomer is the most important person. Louise never said that. And I remember she'd make me talk into this stupid answering machine all the time. And I hated it. And now I know why, because, she didn't want to talk to me because I was such a piece of work. And so one day I let her have it. I gave her a piece of my mind on the answering machine. I told her, here I'm supposed to be so important as a newcomer, and you make me talk into this machine, and I use all kinds of choice language. Well, Louise was not one to shy away from a challenge. Obviously, she was working with me. And she kept the recording. She did not erase it. And then she had the audacity to play it back to me. Oh my God, even I was appalled at how I was talking to this woman who could be my mother. I mean, it was disgusting. So she went on this crusade to clean up my mouth. And I swear this is so true. I went from like 20 curse words to a sentence down to like 10 curse words to a sentence, down to like 5 curse words to a sentence, down to like every other sentence had a curse word, until one day I wasn't cursing. And honestly, I don't really know how it happened other than I took direction. Sponsorship is one of my patch pieces. And lucky me, Louise really had been, and she's now gone to that big AA meeting in the sky. I lost her when I think I was 22 or 23 years sober. But all the years I had her, and since then, her legacy will forever live within me because of what she taught me. I am the woman that I am today because of what that woman gave me. Lucky me. Another one of my patch pieces is meetings. Now, I believe that meeting makers make it. However, it's not only meetings that will do it. Again, my patch piece, all of these things are important. I don't know which one of these things, if I were just to do one of them, I don't know which one would keep me sober. So I do them all. And so meetings, when I was new, Louise used to say, you need to be in a meeting every day. She said, you need to be in a meeting as often as you drank. Well, I drank every day. And I didn't really want to hear that I should be in a meeting every day. So I went looking for someone who had more time than her, who would give me a different answer. It's like playing 2 ends against the middle. Going to mommy for one answer, going to daddy for another answer, or having 2 or 3 sponsors, going to each of them for a different answer, which is why I don't sponsor women that are being sponsored by someone else. So I remember going to this old timer who had a few years over Louise, and I said to him, Bill, how many meetings do you go to? Do you need to go to? And he said, Francine, I probably only need 2 meetings a week. But because I don't know which 2 I need, I go every day. Wrong answer. That was not the answer I wanted to hear. It's like, God, I thought that was overkill. meetings every day. But you know what? Like it or not, with very few exceptions, I've been in a meeting every day. There have definitely been exceptions when I'm traveling, not when I am traveling, I am at a meeting because there are meetings to go to wherever I am. But like if, with a flight, if the flight's delayed, if I have an early flight, there have been a few exceptions. And in the last 3 years, as a result of the pandemic and Zoom, to me, there's not an excuse for me ever to not be in a meeting. Meeting makers make it. One of my other patch pieces is literature. Now, I'm a literature baby. I'm grateful that I did have a sponsor who believed that in Alcoholics Anonymous, we have more than just the big book. Again, if that's all you subscribe to, that's fine. For me, I'm grateful that my sponsor introduced me to books like As Bill Sees It, Living Sober, AA Comes of Age, Language of the Heart, The Grapevine, The 12 and 12. I mean, so many wonderful pieces of AA literature. I'm grateful for that because there have been times in between a meeting, maybe it was in the middle of the night when I woke up and I couldn't talk to someone. I always had a piece of literature I could go and collect. On my bookshelf, I've got 2 shelves filled with AA books. Always, I have a piece of literature. One of my other patch pieces is service. I am also grateful that I had a sponsor who believed that service in Alcoholics Anonymous was really important. Mostly because she said to me, Francine, you can't keep what we give you unless you're willing to give it away, unless you're willing to share it. And she said, for you, it's not enough just to be of service in your group. She said, you can just do that. Many people do, but for you, I want you to understand general service as well. And that's because I had a sponsor who was a delegate at the time. So from the time I think I started going into, I had my first service commitment at the Las Vegas Roundup because I got sober in Vegas when I was 90 days sober. And then when I was 6 months sober, I started going into Gene Prison doing H&I work and, started going into high schools because I was relatively young when I got sober. I was 26. So I started doing a lot of that general service work from the time I was 6 months sober. And I've been doing something ever since. In every one of my home groups, I'm a general service. I've been a general service representative, a GSR. Currently, I'm active in my district. I'm active in my area for 4 years, from 90, I think it was 91 to 94, I can't remember, 92 to 95. I sat on the Grapevine corporate board. I've been involved in Alcoholics Anonymous because you guys have given me the greatest gift anyone could ever give me. Why would I not want to share it? Why would I not want to try to help the next alcoholic? And so service is one of those patch pieces. Another one of my patch pieces is gratitude. So one of my former mentors, he's now also gone to that big AA meeting in the sky, was a guy named Hal Marley. And Glenn might remember him. I don't know if you ever recorded him. But Hal Marley was out of DC. I went to law school at Georgetown. And so my home group at the time was Yays and Nays. That was when we could actually meet in the Capitol. And Hal used to say to me, and I hated it because my face he and Louise both would say to me, Francine, I would talk about being grateful. And they would say, well, tell your face, because my face was always in a pissed off position. So Hal said to me, Francine, you will never, ever see a grateful alcoholic drunk. And I'm thinking, that is not true. I said, I see people who are in and out all the time and they say they're grateful, but then they go out. Hal said, you will never see a truly grateful alcoholic drunk, because if somebody is really grateful for this gift, they're not going to re-gift it. They're not going to give that gift back. Like sometimes if somebody gives you a birthday present or a Christmas present and you don't like it, you give it to someone else as a gift. I don't re-gift my recovery. And so I try my best to stay in gratitude. And I'll tell you, there have been days when it's been really hard to be grateful. And the best I could do was be grateful for the fact that I didn't drink or didn't use drugs. That on certain days, that was as good as it got. But you know what? Being grateful for that has kept me not drinking and not using. Gratitude is one of my patched pieces. Another one of my patched pieces is God. So I didn't believe in God when I got sober. I was raised a Southern Baptist. Again, I think I said I was born in Atlanta, and I was born in 1953. So I was born at a time when Black men were being openly lynched. And so it was really hard for me to wrap my arms around the fact that there was a God that loved me. You know, I remember when I was drinking, I'd stand in the shower and I'd scrape off my skin. I'd try to use bleaching cream to take off my color because I couldn't stomach who I was, because I was taught to hate who I was. You know, by watching TV, by reading books, I was taught that I was not to be loved. And so how could I believe in a God like that? That was my attitude. And yet, you know, I strongly believe today that it was a God I did not believe in who brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was Alcoholics Anonymous that brought me to God. Today, I am one of those people that the 11th step talks about, where I would no more do without my faith than I would air, food, or sunshine. Today, my faith is so powerful. And there are days when I feel like, you know, I'm not so connected to God. Excuse me, but I do know God's there. Even on those days when it feels like God has moved away from me. God is one of my patched pieces. And you don't have to believe in God. You know, in Alcoholics Anonymous, it says God as we understand it, which is why I always find it so interesting if someone calls God anything other than he, people get all bent out of shape. Bill W. himself said, God as we understand God. You know, so we can call God whatever we want or nothing at all. You don't even have to believe. That's the beauty of this program. We get to choose how we show up and how we live. Another one of those patch pieces for me is step work. And I put it like that because it's not just me saying I work the steps, because honestly, for years, I gave it lip service and I wasn't doing anything that even remotely looked like working any kind of steps. You know, as I was sleeping with somebody else's husband, that was not step work. That was not step behavior. And so I today focus on the action that's required. You know, in our big book, most of our 12 steps are located within the into action chapter. That tells me that what's required of me is that I have to do something in order to demonstrate that I'm working the steps. And it's the same thing with gratitude. Gratitude is an action word for me today. It's a verb. It's not a noun. And the steps are action words. It's action that's required for me. So all of these patch pieces, in fact, really speak to the kind of work that I do as I'm doing my step work. And then I think the last patch piece that I want to talk about is something, you know, I'm often asked, and just the other day, actually, a newcomer came to me and she said, okay, Francine, I get you don't drink, I get you go to meetings, you do service, you do all this stuff. But if you had to pick one thing that has really enabled you to not only not drink or use, but to even just be upright and be in a decent mood most of the time, what would that be? And for me, it's my willingness to be uncomfortable. My willingness to be uncomfortable. You know, I can't tell you how often I hear people who go out because they got mad at someone, or they didn't get something they wanted, or they failed an exam, or, you know, they couldn't get their kids back, or their spouse left them, or whatever it is. You know, somebody died, you know, they couldn't get, you know, when COVID hit, you know, there were so many people who didn't want to go to Zoom meetings and then drank. It's like I kept hearing over and over and over again. And so my willingness to be uncomfortable has really served me well. It served me well throughout my recovery. I mean, I'm not someone, number one, I grew up very difficult. I had a very difficult early life. I'm a low bottom drunk. I wasn't plucked out of some big house with a picket fence, and two cars in the garage with a mom and a dad. I grew up on the streets. I was living homeless at 18 years old, and I was at the bottom of the barrel, the very bottom. And so when I got sober, having to work through just the feelings of shame for the way I lived, having to deal with how I felt about myself as a woman, all those things. It was so uncomfortable. So I hated it. And I wanted to drink more often than not. But you know what? I didn't. I didn't. And that was the key. There have been other times in my recovery when, there have been so many challenging periods, but, before I became a lawyer, I failed the bar over and over and over again. I'm admitted currently to 3 bars, 2 of the most difficult bars in the country, New York and California. I'm also admitted to DC. I failed New York twice before I passed it, twice. And at that time, I was speaking at conferences all the time, and my sponsor would never let me not talk about failing the bar. And there were times I'd stand up on the platform and I'd cry. I'd cry, couldn't believe, one more time I had to tell the truth about, what I just went through, a debilitating experience. But I did it. I did it. It was uncomfortable. I didn't like it. I was scared of how I would be judged. And I was judged, just like I'm probably being judged by some of you now. But you know what? So what? So what? I kept showing up. I kept showing up. And then one would think after failing the New York bar, I would know how to take a bar. I can tell you this. I stopped counting how many times I failed the California bar at 6. I stopped counting. So I failed at least 6 times. If you think that was comfortable, think again. I know people who said to me after the first time, I should give it up. God obviously doesn't want you to be a lawyer. Well, that brings up something else for me. I often hear in AA, if it's difficult, God doesn't want you to do it. Well, if that were the case, I wouldn't be sober. If that were the case, I wouldn't be practicing law for 32 years. If that were the case, I wouldn't have been married to my husband for almost 24 years before he passed. If that were the case, nothing I have ever done would I have been able to do. If I only did things that were fun and easy. My willingness to be uncomfortable has served me well. And in the last 3 years in particular, right before the pandemic hit, my husband of almost 24 years passed away. He had cancer. It started out as esophageal cancer. For 2 years, he was sick. I watched this man that I loved die before my eyes. It started out in his esophagus, and then it metastasized into his stomach, and then it metastasized into his bones. And by the time it hit his bones, it was just a matter of time before Richard took his last breath. Within 7 months, I lost my husband. I lost my mother to COVID. I lost one of my cats. And in the last 3 years, I've lost another cat. So 2 cats in the last 3 years, my husband and my mother. I then had to also deal with the pandemic all by myself. I found myself at 66 years old, a widow. That wasn't the way it was supposed to be. Richard and I were just starting to get along. It's like, it took all those years, and then I found myself in that situation. I'm going to tell you, I had a million reasons to drink, a million reasons, but I had one good reason not to. My willingness to be uncomfortable in the face of all of that, it kept me going. All of these things that I talk about in my patched quilt, these are the things that got me through. We often say that, again, if it's not easy, then we shouldn't be doing it. Somebody sent me a text this morning basically saying the same thing. And all I do is shake my head when somebody says that, because I know for myself, sometimes my greatest lessons in recovery have come because I had to climb a mountain, or find another way through a door, or discover a way around a challenge rather than giving up. Because you see, I'm a giver upper. I give up. I give up on relationships. Before I got sober and even in early recovery, if a guy didn't do what I wanted him to do, he was out of there. If I had somebody who was supposed to be my friend who said one thing that felt judgmental, I was out of there. I didn't tolerate a lot of stuff. I didn't know how to be in relationship. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, you've taught me so many things, hard things that I only could learn by being willing to stay the course, by being willing to be uncomfortable. Anyway, I am so grateful to be here. I am going to wrap this up with another reading from As Bill Sees It, which I just love this book. This is in my home group, which is on Zoom. Every day is a literature-based meeting. And I'll tell you, I love it. Tuesdays we do As Bill Sees It. So I like to end with this. And this is one of my favorite readings I like to close with, because for so often I saw myself as a victim. Today I know I'm not. I'm not a victim today. I make choices. Sometimes they're bad choices. Sometimes they're good choices. But I'm never a victim anymore. Never. Even if something happens that I don't like, it's how I handle it that matters. That's what makes me not a victim. So this is on page 4, and it's entitled, Can We Choose? We must never be blinded by the futile philosophy that we are just the hapless victims of our inheritance, of our life experience, and of our surroundings, that these are the sole forces that make our decisions for us. This is not the road to freedom. We have to believe that we can really choose. And what you've given me in 43 years of sobriety is the gift of choice. You taught me that it doesn't matter where I've come from. Doesn't matter what color my skin is. Doesn't matter about any of that stuff. That the only thing that matters in the overall scheme of things is what I do with this most precious gift that you've given me. And not just what I do in an AA meeting, because I want to say it's easy to be nice in AA, but that's not true. It's relatively easy to be nice in AA when you compare it to somewhere else. But the reality is the real work is out there. The real work is in the outside world. Here is my laboratory. Here is where you teach me how to behave in here and out there. But the real work is out there. It's in traffic when somebody cuts in front of me. It's on the line in the supermarket if it says 10 items and I'm there counting the person's items to make sure they don't have more than 10. It's the line in the bank when, they're taking too long and I'm standing there huffing and puffing. It's how I treated my husband before he died. Did I treat him like a dog and treat my sponsees like little goddesses? That's where the real work is. It's in my family. It's outside. And you've given me that gift. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you again, Glenn. And I will need to leave to get to my home group in about 5 minutes. Thank you, guys.